Welcome everyone to Voice for Victims with your producer and host Crystal Starnes. Today we have a guest coming to us originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She now resides in Washington, D.C., I believe. But she has a story for all of you that is something that's going to help a lot of people out there. And she's a victim and a survivor of bullying, harassment, and stalking. So let's welcome Robin Kasarji to the show. Did I say that correctly?
It's cast Georgie, but it's close
Kasarji.
enough.
Okay, I'm
I've
sorry. I wasn't
gotten
sure how to pronounce it.
I've gotten ridiculous pronunciations from jerky to just it's just so funny. I can't wait to get married and have my last name change.
Aw. Well, I'm really happy that you're here, and I feel that you're a natural born leader, with your background and everything, and how you stood up for what was, going on in your life. You stood up for what was right. You put everything aside and you did the right thing. And I feel you're brave and you have a lot of courage, and you're going to help a lot of young girls out there that's going to watch this show, and you're going to help them become, brave, because there's a lot of victims out there that don't report stuff because they're suffering in silence, or they're too afraid, or they're intimidated by whatever activity they're involved in, or whatever's going on in their life. And someone like you speaking out and telling what happened to you is going to help so many people. So thank you so much for coming on. I greatly appreciate this. I'm trying to spread awareness as well. And I'm very happy you're here.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for that. Though, I'm a licensed victim advocate, and for me, if I didn't speak out and say something, I would almost feel like a hypocrite because my whole thing about even being a part of these competitions and things is to advocate not only for myself, but for those who can't or are unable to advocate for themselves and their experiences. So thank you for having me on here.
You're welcome. Well, first, I guess just talk a little bit about who you are and your background, like what got you involved in beauty pageants and, where you are today.
So I was crowned Miss Susquehanna Valley back in March 10th, 9th or 10th, I believe. But before that, I had been competing in beauty pageants on and off since I was a little kid. I have a sister who's 10 years older than me, and she competed, and I wanted to be just like her. And then when it came around to, middle school, junior high, I kind of had some low self-confidence, and my mom knew that I loved competing in pageants, and just it's normally a very good environment for young women because we're all there to support one another. Yes, we're competing against each other, but you make a lot of friends. It's no different than being a part of a cheerleading team, or I did gymnastics. It's the same type of atmosphere. And I just really enjoyed it. And then after competing as a teen, I took about 4 or 5 years off, did my undergrad, traveled a little bit, and then decided, I want to go back. I had friends that were competing in Miss America, and I had never competed in that system before. And I decided, all right, maybe it's time. At the time, I had just gone through being sexually assaulted, and I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and I wanted to use my voice and this platform of pageantry to be able to get out there and advocate. So one thing led to another, and I started competing in the Miss America system. I competed in Pennsylvania. This would have been my third time in Pennsylvania. And I competed in Alaska when I lived up there. I lived there for 2.5 years, and I got first runner up there, and decided that this was my last year. Since I live in Pittsburgh half the time and I lived in DC half the time, I decided to compete for my final year in my home state. And I was really looking forward to it, but unfortunately, after being crowned Miss Susquehanna Valley, things got a little out of hand and out of control. I started receiving death threats about coming back to Pennsylvania and competing. And if I were to compete at Miss Pennsylvania, that this person was going to kill me or burn my house down or kill my mom, my boyfriend, my dogs. It was a very emotional experience. Now, I had been getting bullying text messages from this person for on and off for about 4 years now. And I usually just ignored them. I just chalked it up to I don't even know what. Just I would just delete the text messages and go on with life. I did post a few of them on Facebook from time to time because they were coming from those anonymous text app numbers. And I had them messages traced, and they went back to the specific person's email at the time. Um, but in March, after posting another text chain that I had received from a text app number, I got a phone call from my former local directors when I was Miss Northeastern PA and Miss Wilkes-Barre Scranton PA back in 2019, 2020, right before COVID. And I was told that this isn't something I should be talking about, that I'm just playing the victim, and that the person I was accusing at the time, which at the time I had not actually accused anyone, I had just been asking around if anyone else was getting these messages. Um, but they were told I was accusing this specific person, and that they definitely didn't do it because they know this person and they would never do such a thing. And yes, she has made mistakes in the past and done things in the past, but she's really grown and doesn't do that stuff anymore. And I just kind of went along with it and was like, okay, whatever. I'm not gonna. I was on the other side of the phone crying anyway, and my boyfriend actually recorded a portion of the phone call, which is in that Dropbox. Unfortunately, we can't actually share it with the public, but you can listen to it privately if you would like. And it's just, they basically tell me not to come forward, not to speak about this, not to, literally I got told to stop playing the victim, which was something that one of these directors had posted online, saying that in reality, because I was blaming someone for these text messages, that I was the bully and I was playing the victim, and that the person on the other end is actually the real victim. Because they said there was no proof that they were sending it. But at this point, when the death threats started coming in, they were coming from her personal phone number. And I mean, if you Google this phone number, it came directly back to her. And, those things are easily traced. And I reached out to Apple to try and get some sort of trace from Apple, because it's through iMessaging. So I have AT&T, and AT&T won't show you any information unless it's an SMS message. And Apple told me that it was encrypted and they could not share the data. So I did go to the police. I filed a police report, but nothing ever came of it. And it's just kind of unfortunate. I had told the Miss Pennsylvania pageant organization about this back in March when I made it public that I was receiving text messages again. And they were very supportive in the beginning. They were the ones pushing me to file a police report and go to the police, because they said there was nothing they could do, because at the time, getting these text messages, even though they were from her phone number, was just hearsay and I couldn't prove it. So I did. I went to the police, and as soon as I went to the police is kind of when the support stopped. I think they told me to go to the police thinking that I wouldn't do it. And well, I mean, I originally didn't want to go to the police because I knew that if we were to press criminal charges, that it could, these texts were being sent across state lines. It could become a federal investigation, and she could be charged with sending terroristic threats, which, could carry a federal prison sentence. And I am all about rehabilitation. And I don't think that the US prison system is really geared towards rehabilitation. And I think this person really just needs some sort of therapy or mental health. And that, for me, that was the goal, which is why, and one of the reasons why I decided to pursue this in a civil matter and start with getting a restraining order and then process criminal charges, because I made the report in Pittsburgh at Findlay Township Police, and it just didn't seem like they really took it seriously. And one of the officers actually testified in the civil trial for the restraining order that he just chalked it up to girls being catty, and just went about, brushing it off. But I'm thankful for the National Center for Victim Resources here in DC. They represented me pro bono, and they are all about providing victims with, whatever path that the victims chooses to go through this in legal matter, whether that be criminal or civil or just some sort of therapeutic measures. And my lawyer and team there really helped me file for the anti-stalking order in DC. And we went through about almost 2 months worth of getting ready for the trial, pulling evidence, talking to the police, and then ultimately 3 days of trial over 3 weeks, which included a pre-trial hearing and 2 actual days of trial. Everything was virtual, so really the only people in the courtroom were myself, my lawyer, um, the perpetrator, her lawyer, and the judge. And then there were some people that testified on her behalf. We called one witness, two witnesses. We called the person who served her with the restraining order, the process server, and we called the police officer. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was an interesting and grueling process. It was something that I never thought I would ever have to go through, and it was ultimately very stressful and terrifying, and my hair was falling out to the point that I am finally taking medication to grow my hair back. And it's just, I don't even know what to say. And I decided to speak out because I found out that 20 other young women in the state of Pennsylvania were experiencing this from the same person, and they were all scared, and they were told that if they spoke about it or testified on my behalf in the trial, that they would be stripped of their pageant titles, stripped of their scholarships, and basically blacklisted from the Miss America organization. And which is shocking to me because the Miss America organization is supposed to be a scholarship organization that empowers and uplifts young women. I mean, when I started competing 5 years ago, it was the number one provider of scholarships for young women in the country, providing over $1 million every year. And they helped me pay my way through my graduate degree. And so for that to be the response and for them to literally blame me, saying that I was the one that didn't follow the rules, uh, for, speaking out about it and going to the police and all of that, and saying that I was not a resident of Pennsylvania when I provided them with tax statements and my address and utility bills. And I even have a nonprofit based in Pittsburgh that I still, run, and I'm there every other week. And, I provided them with everything I could, and they still just kind of told me, you know what, there's really nothing we can do for you. And it was sad. And it broke my heart, and it made me nervous for the young women that were still competing, because there was 7 of them that were still competing at states alongside of the person that was threatening them and bullying them, and one of which competing that time around had been physically assaulted by her before. Another young woman who had been assaulted by her before actually spoke out to the Daily Mail anonymously, and I'm very thankful for her. And she actually resigned from the organization as a whole, so that she could speak out. But she just started her dream job and doesn't want anything to interfere with that. So she decided to, remain anonymous, but she is still speaking out in as many ways as possible. And we are hoping to get her in another anonymous interview with In Touch Weekly and the Philly Inquirer coming up, because we're trying to put pressure on the Miss Pennsylvania and Miss America organization to basically just do better. If they really are an organization that is supposed to empower young women and support them and help them become better people, then they should not be supporting any type of bullying, or especially any type of death threats, or allow anyone who has a restraining order granted against them to compete in the same competition as whoever has the order against them. I mean, a judge found her responsible for 15 plus instances of terroristic threats and harassment, one of which occurred in person at the Miss Pennsylvania orientation. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's just kind of mind-boggling to me and very disappointing, in the organization, as a whole.
Now, it was a Superior Court judge that ruled in your favor, correct?
Yes, DC Superior Court, yes.
Yeah. So I mean that's impressive that a Superior Court judge ruled in your favor. I commend him for doing the right thing because it's very hard when you're that high on the chain on judges and they rule in your favor. I mean, it shows that everything that you're saying is true.
I mean, we
And
had three, full, not pages, but kind of, so everything was uploaded to like almost like a Dropbox, but it's specifically a court and it's another program. But we had, it looked like three full pages just of different evidences that went, you had to turn, I don't know how to explain this. So if you look, let's say if you're looking at like the your computer and you have to scroll, even though each one is a separate little icon, there were three pages of icons, each of which was a separate piece of evidence. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, he did rule in my favor. He did put a caveat in the restraining order that said we could both compete in the night of the pageant if we stayed 20 feet away from each other. Now, I don't believe the judge actually understood what takes place during pageant week, that it is a full week long, that we are with together 24/7 alongside of 40 other young women, Miss and teen, and there kind of is no way for us to stay 20 at minimum of 20 feet apart 24/7, considering we would be sharing dressing rooms and we're all in the same hotel and on the bus together and in appearances and photos. I truly believe that he misunderstood and believed that the pageant was just a one night event, which is what most people, including most people in my family, actually think happens. They don't understand that you're there in confined spaces 24/7 together for a full, 7 to 9 days. Plus, for me, I was hoping, they found her responsible, that the pageant was going to say she broke the contract. Because in our contract, it states that you cannot bully or harass anyone. And if you have any charges pending against you, you will be disqualified. And instead, they decided to say that I broke the contract by speaking to the media and by not living in Pennsylvania 24/7, even though I do live there 50% of the time. I pay taxes there. And by Pennsylvania state law, if I pay taxes there, you are legally a resident. Um, so they said that I was the one that broke the contract and that they were going to sue me for that, which they still haven't, and I don't believe that they ever will because they have no case. But we are looking into means of suing the Miss Pennsylvania organization for negligence and possible defamation, as well as a few other things that I have a team of lawyers looking into right now, because I am trying so hard to make sure that there is something put in place for the young women competing in the future, especially since some of the ones who have been assaulted by this person and harassed and sent death threats by this person were under the age of 18, but they are afraid to do anything about it. And their parents don't want to push them, and I get it. And they don't want to lose their scholarship money, and they don't want to lose the opportunities that the Miss America organization can provide for them. And I understand, but it is a little disappointing that more young women aren't coming out publicly, but I would never force anyone to do something they weren't uncomfortable with. Many of them have sent me pictures and screenshots of their text messages, shared their experiences with me as well as with my lawyer so that we could know some sort of background information on what we were getting ourselves into.
well, I'm glad that you said that you guys are pursuing that because I was going to mention that you should file a lawsuit against them.
Yeah, we are
They,
definitely looking into it. The Miss America organization as a whole is going through its own legal issues at the moment. They don't actually know who owns it. So I think we're trying to wait until that is finished so that we can focus on suing the organization from our side. And we're just trying to put all of our ducks in a row before we actually go through with that.
well, I mean, has any of the victims, the other, like the ones that are underage, has anybody reported it to the organization?
Yeah, many of them. As of back in 2020, one of the young women that spoke out that recently resigned from her position with the organization, filed multiple grievance reports, talked about how she was rape shamed by this person, how she was hit by this person, how she screamed obscenities at her in the middle of a restaurant while in her crown and sash, how she basically sent her bullying and harassing text messages threatening her and her family. And the organization kind of told her that there's nothing we can do. This is all hearsay. You can't prove any of it. Even the text messages aren't proof. And the fact that no other witnesses are coming out about it, there's nothing we can do. They told me when I first tried to file a grievance that unless I provided the names of the other victims and witnesses, that there was nothing they could do. And I refused to provide the names of any of the other victims, even though over the past 5 years that I know of, because I've only been in the organization for 5 years, there have been multiple grievances and reports filed against this person, three of which I know of about last year. One of which I don't want to speak about it because it's not my story to tell. If she decides she wants to speak out even anonymously, then we can talk about that. But her experience was worse than mine, and she is absolutely terrified to be sued, so she won't speak out. And there's another.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just
No.
had thought that's it sounds to me like you all have been being gaslighted by this organization, and the victim, or not the victim, the perpetrator. Um, but especially the organization is gaslighting, trying to make it look like it's everybody else's fault except this person's fault. This is standard. Like with people that have an organization, that there's a lot of power and control, and they don't want to take an action. This is what they do. This is the type of behavior they will do on victims. And, people need to stand up. You could go to the Attorney General's office, all of you could go there, and they could do an investigation. I mean, this is went on even in the churches.
Yeah.
You saw them kids that came out, all the victims out there, if you're watching this, please don't be afraid. Go speak to the Attorney General's office in Pennsylvania, because they investigate this type of stuff. And if you don't speak out, our children, all of our children are going to be victimized and continue to be victimized by this organization. This upsets me. I have two daughters of my own, and my daughters have been involved in competition cheer for years, throughout their life. And, my one daughter was bullied, the last time she was in cheer, and she hasn't been in cheer for 2 years now because of it. And it's very upsetting. I mean, we pay money, we put our kids in this type of activity to try to make them become independent and more self-confident. I'm sure that's why your parents did that, and you obviously wanted to do that as well. But it helps all of the kids. It helps you. It helps everybody. It builds your self-confidence. You work very hard to get to where you are today. And then you have somebody like that's bullying and harassing just because of they don't have self-confidence, or they're jealous, or, they're intimidated, or whatever the case may be that's going on with them. But they're constantly harassing and bullying, these people. It needs to stop, because
No,
if it
absolutely.
doesn't stop, there's going to be more victims, and then eventually somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody could die. I mean, anything could happen. I mean, we need to protect our children, and protect all, you and everybody. I mean, it's just very upsetting to hear this. So I hope that the victims that are going through this, I hope you take a stand. Parents, please, don't be afraid. I once was a victim, and I'm a survivor of sexual assault and abuse. I had a judge victimize me at my place of employment. I used to be a probation officer, and I stood up, and I had 4 judges rule in my favor, and I won. So you know what? That was very hard being an officer. All them years, I put myself through college, everything, and I stood up for what was right. It's very hard to do, but you know what? I'm glad I did it, because I'm helping so many people now. And I don't be afraid. Life will work out for all of you. It always does. God has a plan for all of us. It always works out in the end. So I mean, that's the message I want to deliver. I'm sorry that I just wanted to bring
No,
this
you are,
up.
this is your podcast. And thank you for sharing,
Yeah, but
with me,
I
because
want
I
you to,
didn't know your personal story, and that's, it's very inspiring. And, I get why you do all of this. And, I tried to report my sexual assault. It was my first semester freshman year of college, and it's very, very small town. And I went to the police, and they were just they literally asked me, well, what did you do? what were you wearing? And it was just, so I left, and I basically never spoke about it again until after going through therapy. And then it led me to getting my, advocacy license and trying to, and push for better laws. And that's something that I want to come out of this too, is Pennsylvania doesn't have an anti-stalking order or any type of restraining order unless it is a PFA, protection from abuse order. But when I tried to get something like that, it was, you had to either be in an intimate relationship with this person, living with this person, or related to this person. And I also didn't qualify for a PFI, which is a protection from intimidation order, because that is usually reserved for minors being intimidated by an adult. And I didn't know what else to do. I'm very lucky that I also have residence in the District of Columbia, because there are orders. Like, that's why I filed for the anti-stalking order in DC and not in Pennsylvania. But the police reports I made were in Pennsylvania. And it's just, it's rough. So I've been trying to reach out to like Governor Shapiro and senators and such, because thankfully, because of the Miss America organization and competing, I have been able to meet people and make those connections, and actually been able to help put laws and trainings into book. I mean, I travel the country. Well, I actually have traveled the world in the past couple of years training law enforcement and hospital staff on violence against women and human trafficking identification signs. And if I hadn't started competing in Miss America, that might not have been something I have been led to it, because of the people I've met competing and the connections I made. I mean, the organization ultimately for me helped make me a better person. And this is just also disappointing and unfortunate that this is what it's come to, in the last 5 years. I mean, the Miss America National Organization has been through 3 or 4 different ownership hands since I started competing 5 years ago. And I think a large part of that has contributed to the negligence by the organization, but that's not an excuse. There shouldn't be any type of death threats or bullying or harassment or assault just making its way, pushed under the rug. It all needs to come out in the open. And if that means making the organization look bad, unfortunately, that's going to happen, because just because I'm speaking out doesn't mean that I didn't get good out of it and that it's not providing good for other people. It means that the organization itself needs to do better in the future. And that's really what I'm trying to push here, is finding a way to implement something that's going to make the state organizations, the local organizations, and the national organization actually follow through and say, no, it has to stop here. We're going to stop it before it even gets to the point where someone needs to go to the police and make it and get a restraining order. Because this should have been stopped years ago. This has been going on for multiple women, at least in Pennsylvania, to my knowledge, for more than 5 years. Now, like I said, I've only been involved with the organization since 2018, 2019. But I know young women who were victimized by this person when she was competing as a teen. And it's just unfathomable to me that there have been no consequences. To my knowledge, now this may not be true, so to my knowledge, I have learned that this person had been warned multiple times, that if they didn't change their behavior, they would be banned from competing. Last year specifically, there was a big blow up about things that happened. I wasn't there. I only know what the young women who competed were told me, that this person, and basically emotionally tortured them, and that no one would believe them, and that she was warned once again and then was ultimately allowed to return to compete this year. And it's why several girls didn't come back to compete, including a former first runner-up and people that had made semifinals and competing. And they were like, we're just done. We can't, we'll go and we'll watch our friends and we'll support our friends who are still competing, but we can no longer support the Pennsylvania organization, because they're just re-victimizing and blaming us for trying to do better.
Yeah, this is just upsetting to hear this, that this happened to you and there's other victims.
Yeah, I ran into the mom of a couple moms of some of the victims, multiple of which have sent me emails and messages and Facebook messages about thank you for coming forward. We're glad someone is doing it. This has been going on way too long, but they are not coming forward as witnesses to their own children's um, harassment, which is unfortunate. But again, I don't want to force anyone to do anything they're uncomfortable with. I just wish more people were willing to speak out about it. I know one of the moms I ran into recently said that her daughter is just done with Pennsylvania completely. She wants to be a part of the organization. She needs the scholarship money, but she's leaving the state. Like she's like done. I know a couple girls over the last couple years that have just left the state completely, decided to go to school in other states against going to a state school or something here that was less expensive because they were like, we just don't want anything to do. We don't want to be in the area. I have personally turned down speaking engagements and job opportunities on the eastern side of Pennsylvania because I don't want to be in the area where she lives because I just don't want to risk it. I mean, this person told me that if I showed up, she was going to run me over with her car. And from the actions and the words and things that I have seen her do, I have no reason not to believe her. I truly think she would follow through with this, and which is one of the reasons why I didn't decided not to compete. Um, Not to mention in the court order that I was granted, it says that she has to stay 100 yards away from my boyfriend, my mom, and my dogs because they were all outright threatened. And had I gone and competed, I would have only not just been jeopardizing my safety, but if my mom and my boyfriend came to support me, I would be jeopardizing their safety as well because they might not even, legally be allowed to be there. Though the judge did say that it was not on me to follow the rules of like the restraining order. It was on the person it was granted against. Like if I walked into a coffee shop, she would have to leave. Now, I would never do that to someone. If I walked in somewhere and she was already there, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go somewhere else. But he explicitly said that it was not, my responsibility, that it was the person who the restraining order was against, its responsibility to uphold that. So, but I don't, like I said, I don't trust her and I didn't trust the organization to protect me. I had asked multiple times, do I need to bring my personal, protective service with me? We have a friend who is a former Pennsylvania state trooper who did security for Miss Universe, and and he volunteered to come as my personal bodyguard. He also volunteered to had a friend of his volunteered who was a woman who could be backstage with me, while I was changing and all that stuff, since there's so many young women back there, who said she would also come and, be personal protection for me. But I got no response. I asked them in the beginning after this all started, do I need to drop out of this competition? Will that be easier? I don't want to. I want to be able to come and compete for scholarships. There were over $70,000 of scholarships given away, and even just a fraction of that could help, you know, pursue further education. I want to get my doctorate, and after all this, I now want to go to law school. So that would have been, any portion of that would have been tremendously helpful. But it was the no response and the just brush off by the organization's director, the board, and, people that are high up in the organization just kind of like, meh, not taking it seriously, which is highly, like I said, highly, highly disappointing. I even reached out to the CEO, the current CEO of Miss America, and never received a response from her directly. Now, I got response indirectly from her, from people that I know that worked around her or knew her would say something, but never once did I have a response from her until I actually donated to the Miss America program back in January before the actual national competition took place. I got an email from her saying, thank you for your donation, but that's it. I've never
Wow.
once heard anything from her. I've never gotten a response from the national board. And I sent them, not all the text messages, but a good chunk of the text messages that I received. And, once I did, after, a month and a half of no response, it was kind of, all right, this needs to be taken a lot more serious legally wise. And that's when I went to the police and was like, please help me. I approached the police in DC as well to ask. Now, I didn't make a formal report in DC, but I went and I asked, what are my options here? And they said, even if the text messages and the threat in person hadn't happened in DC, because I had a partial DC residence, that I am able to file for an anti-stalking order in DC, because some of the text messages and phone calls came when I was in Pennsylvania, some came when I was in DC, some came when I was in Virginia and Nebraska at one point, Illinois at one point. I travel the country monthly. Doing work and doing advocacy and promoting my nonprofit and such. And it's just, it's a lot. And this was something that I didn't need. Obviously, no one needs this on their plate, but this was just something that I couldn't have imagined would ever escalate to this.
Well, you've been through a lot, and thank you so much for telling your story. And I think you will prevail. I
Thank you.
obviously
I hope so.
I've went through the federal lawsuit system. I know how it works, and I'm not an attorney, but just my experience of going through it for years. And I've been in an organization that was gaslighting, similar to like what's happened to you. And I truly believe that you will prevail, even if some other victims don't come forward. I feel that you will. I
Well,
hope that other victims do, though.
two others have recently sent me like written statements that they are willing to share with the media. So I'm hoping to be able to share those. I'll upload them into the Dropbox so that you have them, if you want to take a look at them and share them. But I really hope that something good comes out of all of this and that some sort of change is implemented into the organization so that this doesn't ever happen again. That is my big goal for this, is to use the media, use your podcast and other outlets to put some sort of pressure on the organization to just do better and support the young women that are, taking part and donating and spending their time promoting the organization, just to protect them and take care of them better.
That's a great message to put out there. And one thing I did have a question about is like going through this whole situation, how did you cope with it? Like what kind of advice could you give to other people out there that might be in a situation? Like what
I
you
am
do?
very lucky to have a wonderful support team. So my biggest piece of advice is surround yourself with people that you love and trust, and not only that you love and trust, but that love and support and trust you no matter what is going on. I have my mom is always in my corner. I know not everybody has that, but I have a very small core group of two or three friends that have been in my life for years, and they were all very supportive, very just behind me all the way. They were like, you need to do what you have to do. We're going to support you in any way that is best for your physical and mental health and well-being. And so that's my biggest thing, is just make sure that if you are going through some sort of traumatic event, you need don't be afraid to seek help. Therapy, especially. I'm a psychologist and I'm a big advocate for therapy. But, keeping those people around you that are going to love you for you, um, and not love you because they either want something from you or they want clout or some sort of, anything. Um, just, you know, make sure you have, even if it's just one person, that outlet that you can go to and confide in is really important.
That's very good advice. And thank
That,
you.
and I have four dogs that I come home to every day that, just when they jump on me, it's kind of like everything is washed away.
Yeah, I love animals too.
They're the best. They're upstairs running around right now. I don't know if you can hear them.
I can't right now. I think I might have heard a bark a little bit ago, but that was it.
Probably. Yeah, we've got two big dogs and two small dogs, and now that we're moving, I'm like, I want another dog.
Well, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Is there any information you want to share with others? Like you said, you have a nonprofit. Would you like to promote
I
it?
do. I have a nonprofit. It's called Taking Back Power. It is based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we provide resources for survivors of sexual and domestic violence, as well as human trafficking. But more than that, we also provide educational resources for law enforcement, hospital staff, school staff, and the public in general if they want any sort of education or seminars or training sessions on how to identify domestic and sexual violence and human trafficking. There is it's a very small group of us that work for this organization. I founded it back in 2020. And it's, I'm having trouble getting it off the ground, but I've recently made some connections that I'm hoping that within the next couple years, we'll be able to build a shelter and be able to have people that are escaping situations like that have a safe space to go. But yeah, I mean, everything there is volunteer based. We help any financial uh, donations or anything that come in go directly into the organization. I don't get salaried or anything from it. No one that works there, we're all volunteer. And we all have little niches of areas where we're experts in. Like I am very big on sexual and domestic violence. That's kind of my niche. I have someone who specifically supports human trafficking, someone who specifically supports minors, someone who specifically supports elder abuse. So hopefully together we can work to expand the nonprofit and hopefully go national at some point and be able to spread more education and resources across the country. Also, if anyone knows a website designer, because we would like to get our website up and running. I bought the domain back in 2020, but I've tried to create the website myself and it's just awful and I'm embarrassed to publish it. So, and any victims and survivors of bullying, harassment, my social media is public. Feel free to reach out to me. You don't have to be a former or current pageant contestant. I'm willing to talk to anyone who just needs someone to talk to. My DMs are open. You're more than welcome to just send me a message and say hi.
Well, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you again. I think it's great that you have that nonprofit. 'Cause
Thank
we
you.
need more of this. Thank you everyone out there for watching today. And if anyone out there wants to come on the show, reach out to voiceforvictimspodcast.com. And till next time, take care, everyone.